thank you for taking the time to be on the show. Exciting times. You're about to have your short film at the Real Asian Festival. And I was kind of like researching you and went on your IMDb, and it's pretty cool. It seems like you made a transition from being on the production side to actually making your own, like being the director of a film. Like, is this something new to you, or?
I'd love to say that it's a transition, but they've kind of been two streams that have been going at the exact same time for most of it. Yeah, I've been working for about about 18 years in film production. I started off working as a set dresser, and then moved into to lighting work. And so for the last like 13 years, I've been working in like lighting design and lighting and stuff. At the same time as I've been working on my own projects. So it's basically like I do the lighting design stuff to pay the bills between my own projects. In an ideal world, I would be doing more of the directing and less of the lighting design than I am now. But the reality is it's exceptionally hard to make a living as a filmmaker in this country right now. So a lot of people who work in the industry who do very creative standalone work ultimately have to keep themselves afloat by working as technicians and below the line artists on American film and TV productions that shoot here. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's actually even like more common than I think people would think. I've even like had so many side hustles, and I would even do like some rigging for like concerts and stuff, and then all of a sudden I just see like on the same shift some people like who were like the drummer of like this metal band I used to listen to and stuff, and it's just like these bills got to be paid like in the off season when you're not touring, when you're not making films or whatever. And it's very common for like creatives to have like maybe like 10 side hustles and like little things they can jump in and out of in the in between time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, to steal something from my, to steal an aphorism from my grandfather, it would be that you got to make hay when the sun's shining, you know? And the thing is, yeah, like self-led artistic pursuits, I mean, the world over, but I would argue kind of especially in Canada right now, tend not to make a lot of money for the artist in question. So the side hustles are important because not only do they keep you afloat between your own projects, but in a lot of cases they actually subsidize those projects. Like, so, you know, I can't get too mad about the lighting work that I do, because at the end of the day I know that work and the fact that I've attained a high enough level at that end of my career means that I get to subsidize projects that I really want to work on of my own stuff, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And it looks like you've been working on like a lot of amazing stuff, like Star Trek Discovery, to like I saw like Stephen King's It reboot in there, and that's so amazing. And like, and kudos to your work too, because those like the show in that movie itself, like it's just lit so amazingly, like it's really wicked.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been lucky in the last 5 years to have been working on a bunch of really interesting shows. I'm right now working on season 4 of Star Trek Discovery, and I've been on it since the first season, so that's going on 4 years that I've been working on that show. Obviously, my part of the lighting work for the show, because shows like that are so big, is obviously a very small part of it. But it's nice to be a part of it. It's nice that the work that we do gets recognized. And I think the thing that for me is most rewarding is simply that it's nice to be on a show every once in a while that people have heard of, because the job of a technician and a below the line artist anywhere entails ultimately doing a lot of work that people haven't heard of and is not terribly highly regarded, because you do the shows that come to you and you do what pays the bills. So it's nice to, most of my IMDb is filled with stuff that you've probably never heard of and wouldn't even know where to see. So it's nice to be in a position that people can ask me, well, what are you doing at the lighting side of things? And I can be like, oh, Star Trek Discovery, and they've actually heard of the show that I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice change of pace.
Yeah, yeah. And it's cool that you're like, even though like you make films yourself and you're still under the same bubble of that industry. I know so many different creatives where like their side hustle is something outside of it. So even though like you're always on sets and probably just like subconsciously continually to picking up and learning things and just seeing like things, and that can only like help your own work get like super stronger. Like
Absolutely, yeah. It's especially in the early parts of my career when I first started working in lighting, especially there was a lot of there were a lot of lessons both to run towards and run away from that I took and applied to my work. So it's good for certainly keeping you at least moderately creatively engaged. Because you're still working in the same industry, you're still seeing the trends that are in operation, and can have a chance, to stand outside of that a little bit, and have kind of a bit more of an objective kind of take on it when you then sit down and start to work on your own work, or start to write a new script, or direct something new, or what have you.
yeah, definitely. And today I watched your short film Receiver. I want to say it was really cool, really unique, kind of an angle of like a horror movie that I haven't seen before, which I think like there, which is really refreshing because I feel like there's so much stuff that's continually like recycled, and within a short time, it felt like you just told like this big tale of what was going on. And I'm also like trying not to give too much away, but yeah, it was just very unique of just like the perception of an operator, a telephone operator, almost getting hypnotized by someone who keeps calling and getting tortured in that way. And I kind of want to know, where did that idea kind of spawn from?
Yeah, well, so Receiver, as you've alluded to, follows Sriani, who's an idealistic and very overtaxed Sri Lankan Canadian telephone counselor, on a single terrible work night, as she's confronted by an insidious caller with the mysterious power to control her mind. Where that came from is actually kind of a range of sort of personal and semi-personal experiences, because my girlfriend Stephanie works as a social worker, and at the time that my co-writer on Receiver, Luke Higginson, and I were sitting down to start working on the film, Steph was actually working as a telephone counselor. So based on getting the chance to see her experiences, we really got the chance to see the level of emotional labor and empathy that's expected from both her employers and also her clients. So the more Luke and I kind of explored that, the more it really started to scare us. Like the more it presented, for us anyway, a real slate of fears and dangers that arose from the whole concept of the commodification of empathy, right? Because the whole thing is that empathy is basically the bedrock of the modern social work industry. And the more we commodify somebody's empathy, the more that empathy can be weaponized against them. So it became clear to us when we realized that that's really what the story was about, that the film was already kind of announcing the genre it wanted to be, that this wanted to be a psychological horror film. And then once the ideal genre became clear, we sat down and started looking at the right matching metaphor to explore these ideas. And you touched on the issue of hypnosis, and the thing is, a successful hypnosis subject requires a level of emotional investment that is pretty comparable to what is expected of social workers.
Ah, interesting.
So for us, it was a way of unpacking the experiences of women in the workplace, specifically through the lens of social work, which, as I'm sure you're probably aware, is a very gendered industry. By and large, the large majority of social workers out there are women, and there is a significant amount of those who are women of color, who end up being slotted in by society's expectations into helper positions, both informally and formally when it comes to their careers. And so we thought that would be a great opportunity to unpack those sorts of issues, but do it in a way that we could have a message and have a theme that people don't expect, because they don't necessarily come into a psychological horror film or a horror film of any sort expecting that kind of message. So we felt like that would be a good way of slipping it in through the back door, so to speak, and getting the message, getting that theme out to people who might be going into a genre film not necessarily expecting there to be that kind of sociological meat behind it.
Yeah, definitely. It's really cool to hear you break down like all the extra layers of this too. It's making me appreciate it much more when I already appreciated the short film in the first place. But yeah, it's also interesting to hear and just think about too. Like I know a lot of people who are social workers too and have had clients kind of overly get attached to them and stuff because basically you're helping them and like I don't know, it's like almost like it's a common thing in that industry. And I'm sure like even with all the hypnosis and superpowers aside, it's on the base scenario of that could be a scary thing as well too, depending on who your client is.
Absolutely. Now, to be clear for your listeners, obviously it is a creative engineering that we did to the story, the whole hypnosis and manipulation angle. My girlfriend obviously did not go through any of that, but you're absolutely correct. If you know social workers, if you have experience working in that or experience with people who work in that environment, you know that the layers of personal interchange can get really murky, especially when you're talking about telephone counseling, because there is this telephonic wall between people as well that shifts the dynamic of counselor to client, because of course you're dealing with very personal issues. You have people who are on the phone perhaps pouring their hearts out, and in some cases talking about literally some of the worst personal experiences that an individual can go through, that they are pouring out to you, seeking your help in whatever fashion that takes, because of course different counselors will work in different avenues for help and for assistance and with different programs. But you have people who are bearing their souls and their lives and their experiences to you, but of course you can't see them in person. And in reality, somebody could be giving you a false name. You know, if they give you a name at all, there's this interrupted social connection when you are dealing with counseling over the phone that I think creates a really interesting dynamic for both the counselor and for the client.
Yeah, definitely too. And even like on the client side, I could see like some of them getting that close because they're telling you things they've never told anybody before, and just I don't know, they get locked in and like maybe mistake the relationship as love, and that's when it gets scary, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, and it doesn't even have to go to that extreme. I think any social worker who works in a call-in field will tell you that they have regular callers who call back every day or every week, even if they don't necessarily have something to talk about. People that that make it hard to keep that emotional separation up, because you are hearing from them, you are interacting with them over such a long time frame that it takes a huge amount of training on the part of social workers, I think, to be able to do the job properly, to be able to provide the requisite amounts of empathy and work that it requires, while also not giving an unprofessional amount of themselves in return. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, and then you get down to the extreme examples that I'm sure anybody who works in telephone counseling has had to deal with, which is that you have to deal with arousal callers and things like that, where you actually get individuals who are calling in to take advantage of what could be a very one-sided relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And and my girlfriend has had to deal with that as well. Everybody who works in that field has to deal at one point or another with abusive callers, we might say. Be it arousal calling or people who are calling to vent and want to take out their problems on the counselor, people who call and hurl abuse at people, sometimes with reason ostensibly, and sometimes are literally just calling in so that they can scream at somebody on the other end of the phone. There's a huge range of what people can experience. I've only certainly in my life touched on a handful of that based on my research for this film and some other work I did on previous projects. But it seemed like a really interesting in to explore these kind of issues in that environment. And you touched on something a little earlier that you said you didn't, in your experience, you hadn't quite seen a film quite like a horror film quite like this. And that's a really exciting thing to hear, because that was also one of the driving factors behind having the main character be Sri Lankan Canadian, is that there's never really been a character like Sriani at the head of a horror film or a psychological horror film at all. And for us, that seemed like a really good way of getting the audience to think about issues differently, to think about genre differently, because we were already presenting what at its face might seem like a tired concept, but presenting it through an entirely different lens by focusing on a type of character that doesn't get featured in a sort of project like this that often.
Yeah, it's true. It makes it actually extra scarier too, because it seems like somebody who's just like, especially being in the city, like could be like just your neighbor in your apartment and everything, and it's just it's kudos for like that style of casting too, if it was just like the conscious thing to do. And also I want to give you another kudos on making the telephone scary in a horror movie, because I find after time, just like as cell phones evolve too, like all the horror movies, the beginning has to like establish, okay, the phone's broken, there's no signal or whatever, where the whole focus is like the phone is what's scary about your film, which is wicked as well too.
Thanks. Oh, I mean, I feel like anybody who makes horror films ultimately has to make films that interlock with their own personal fears. And not that I'm scared of using the telephone, but I hate using the phone. I don't enjoy the act of speaking to people over the phone. It's a disconcerting experience for me, I think, even in the most benign terms. And I've done some reading on psychological reasons why people who even enjoy being social, enjoy talking to people, do not like talking on the telephone. And it's the whole fact that your brain is fooled by the fact that it feels like you are in person talking to somebody, but they are not there. There is a level of psychological incongruity that makes it an uncomfortable baseline experience for a lot of people. And that's certainly my case. And so when we got to talking, Luke and I, about this original concept, it probably wasn't too much of a stretch for me to say, I think we can make the act of being on the telephone uncomfortable, because that's how I feel.
Yeah. It comes from like a real place. And man, I understand that too. Even earlier when I started doing the show too, I always tried to make the interviews in person, but as like the way the world shifted, obviously I got to do them on Zoom calls for safety and stuff, which Zoom, I don't find that bad, but there was a handful I did on the phone, and I just like felt nervous when I shouldn't be. And it's just like, I don't know if it's just you can't see the person's expressions or like body language or whatever. It just seems like this unknown, like weird void to me too. And it's uncomfortable in a way.
I absolutely agree. And the interesting thing is that video chat doesn't fall to the same issues. Like right now, you and I are speaking on Zoom, and I'm in no way uncomfortable with this, and I think it has to do with the fact that we are seeing each other. It's that, we're hearing each other's voices, we're seeing each other. There's a level of congruity there that our brains are telling us, okay, yes, we're really here sharing some kind of physical presence with this individual.
211, this is Sriani. How can I help you?
Well, hello there, Sriani. I called back a bunch of times tonight, kept getting random dudes. I want to talk to you. Not some professional.
I am a professional, Drake.
Everything feels black. Alone. I mean, you're alone too. Do you hear me? Count down with me. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. I'm gonna call you again tonight. 5. Do you hear me?
Yes.
4, 3, 2, 1.
My name is Sriani. How can I help you?
something I wanted to ask you too is, have you ever been hypnotized yourself?
I sort of, and I say sort of. The real answer is no, but you know, those goofy kind of high school PE days and stuff when you have people in, you know, you have motivational speakers in or whatever. Twice when I was in high school in PEI, we had like entertainment hypnotists who were in to just just you know, do a bit of a gag and blah blah blah. And once out of that, I was picked from the audience to go up, and he could not successfully hypnotize me. I suspect a lot of it had to do with the fact that I'm not an overly credulous person, and I think I brought a lot of my skepticism, even as a teenager, up onto that stage. And I just I couldn't, if I can't shut off the skeptical part of my brain, I'm obviously not gonna click with the kind of worldview that the hypnotist is suggesting. You know?
Yeah, it's gonna fight it basically.
Yeah.
I had a weird thing, almost same thing, like a college assembly. And I didn't know what kind of hypnotist it was. It was just like me and my friend, we got in late, and he was on stage like in like this theater, and he saw that we came in late, and there was already some people on chairs about to be hypnotized, and he was just like, "You two get on stage." So I'm just like, okay, and then we're like laughing. We're like, "What the fuck? We think this is like a hypnosis thing or whatever." Then he started going into his thing, and for probably about 30 seconds, I actually went under, and then I came out of it, and all around me in the chairs was everybody just kind of nodded off, like sleeping, and he's doing his like whole gimmick, just like speaking in his monotone, soothing voice, and then he noticed like I woke up like kind of confused, and as he was doing his act, he kept pointing at me and being like, for people listening to the audio version, I'm like kind of giving like a sign like get off the stage, but he and I was confused. I didn't know what's going on. And then after a moment, I'm just like, oh, okay. I'm like, he noticed like I'm not under, and then I just got off the stage and I just started watching it, and thank God I woke up. It was like one of these X-rated hypnosis dudes, and everybody by the end of it was just like humping their chairs, and I'm just like, oh my God, I was saved. But
your subconscious saved you from the embarrassment with your student body.
Yeah, and that's the only time I've ever had like an experience like that. And like you too, I was like skeptical. I always thought like there was like on these things that I would see on TV with hypnosis, I'm like, oh, they must be plants or whatever. But it felt like for like a good moment I actually went down for the count, which is frightening that humans have the power to do that. Like, wow.
Well, in the research that we did for Receiver when it came to the whole hypnosis angle, I mean, there's ultimately a lot of things that films get wrong about hypnosis, but I do believe hypnosis works. You have to be a person who's going to go along with it. I mean, it's sort of tying into my earlier point about the overlap between like a successful hypnosis subject and a social worker is both of those involve you basically buying into the world that is being spun for you by the person you were speaking with, right? You have to ultimately, as a successful hypnosis subject, you have to accept the presentation of the world, this ultimately imaginary world that the stage hypnotist is presenting to you. And if you can't buy into that, then you will not be successfully able to go under. And accordingly, it's like, you know, people can't be hypnotized into doing things that they would never actually do, based on the research that I've done. And there's also an interesting thing came up for me in the research, which was that most successful hypnosis revolves not around directly influencing the person to do X. It's not about, oh, if I want you to do X, I'm going to tell you to do X. Because as I understand, that typically doesn't work. The successful way of achieving this is to spin a set of circumstances that you can get the individual to buy into, that lead them in the direction of doing the thing that you want them to do. Which, interestingly, is not actually dissimilar to being a director in stage or in film, because you that's kind of the way that you work with actors. That's not to suggest that directors go around hypnotizing their actors, but one of the most successful ways of getting an actor to get in the right headspace that you want is you set up a set of circumstances for them. The strategy I use, that certainly it's not by any means anything I invented. It's been used for decades within stage and film, but it is basically to ask like what ifs. Or to suggest what if. So, what if your character had just come back from the gym when this scene opens? What if you had just been listening to this piece of music? You're suggesting these sideways circumstances that you can get your performer to buy into that then lead them in the direction that you want them to go in. And that's much more successful than telling an actor, I want you to cry when you say this line.
Yeah.
It's
And
much
like
more
3,
successful.
2, action. Okay, go. It's like, why aren't you crying?
Yeah, exactly. That's a horrible way of trying to elicit an emotional response from a performer of any sort. So it's much more successful to set up a set of circumstances. Like, if you wanted an individual to cry, you might suggest, well, what if at this line you were thinking about the death of your childhood pet? Or something like that. So I found that kind of interesting, that there's ultimately a bit of overlap in terms of how directors tend to work with actors, and also how stage hypnotists work with their subjects.
Oh, that's amazing. And it sounds like it would be awesome to be on like a set with you too, just kind of just like how you break it down like that too. It's just I don't know. It sounds cool, and obviously like it's also what's interesting too, as you compare like being a director with a hypnosis type of person, it's almost like you have to trust them and like go into their world in a way, because I'm sure like an actor and an actress, especially if it's their first time working with you and everything, they don't know how the film's actually going to look or how it's going to be edited or whatever, and you have to like get them fully into that space, and they have to have like a moment where they just kind of just let go and just dive into it and hope for the best,
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, in both of those kinds of relationships, trust is, to my way of thinking, absolutely paramount. And I can speak less in terms of the hypnotic relationship because I'm not a stage hypnotist, but when it comes to the relationship between directors and actors, you're absolutely correct. The interesting thing, though, is even if a performer has worked with a director before, they're still not going to know how the film is going to be cut together. You never ultimately know that, unless, of course, either A, you have a relationship with the director where the director invites you into the editing room, or B, if you were a big enough star that you can just say, I want to be involved in the editing process, which for established enough actors who may or may not work as their own producers, that is obviously a possibility. But for most of the other relationships that exist between directors and performers, the performer has to trust the director, because you have to trust them in the moment, that they are not going to give you direction that's going to lead you away from the ideal performance that you're both going for, and not going to give you direction that's going to lead you to do something foolish. But then, of course, you have anywhere between a couple of months to a couple of years after your part of the film is basically done, that the director goes away with completely different people and makes the film. Orson Welles had a line that I think about quite often, which is that every film is actually 3 films. You write one film, you direct a second, and you edit a third. And the thing is, your actor is present occasionally for the writing, so occasionally for the first film you're making. They're always present for the second film that you're making, and they're rarely ever present for the third one. So yeah, performers have ultimately got to trust that the director is going to do their performance justice by the time that they're cutting the third film when they're making a project.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, it's really cool to hear you break it down that way too. It's one thing I know. I get like so many different artists, not just like in film. Like I've had comedians on here, musicians too, and there seems to be like an overlap of, I don't know, the inspiration people get when they talk about like the nitty gritty of the art form and kind of breaking it down like that. It's cool. Like, and yeah, it's interesting to, I want to ask too, did Receiver kind of turn out how you thought it would? Like you said, there's like the three stages of making it. Like as you were writing it, like by the editing time was done, was it the thing that you imagined it to be, or did it turn something into something else along the way?
It mostly, I would say it's about 80% the film I envisioned it being, which, to my way of thinking, is a tremendous success, because every film becomes something different in the editing room. Every film ends up in a position that there are happy and unhappy accidents that take place on set that you can't do anything about. The thing is, no matter what scale of filmmaking you're doing, there's never enough time and there's never enough money. So you always end up in a position of creative compromise when you're on set. Different directors are better or worse at being willing and able to compromise creatively. For me, because I have so much experience working at another side of film production, I know that compromise is an inherent part of it. So I have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C at any given time. So that, I think, helps. By the time I get my work into the editing room, it's usually most of the way towards one of those three plans. But of course, there's still curveballs that get thrown at you with regularity, and you have to roll with the punches. At the end of it, by the time the film is in the can, so to speak, and you're in the editing room, most, especially independent films, do not have the money to go back and reshoot things that did not work. Now, high budget features and studio features and television projects, they usually have the money to reshoot a certain amount of material, and they oftentimes build it into their budget a set number of reshoot days. But for independents, that's basically impossible. So by the time you get the work into the editing room, it's all about cutting it in a way that makes the best possible film of what you've got left, so to speak. Not to sound defeatist about it, but at the end of the day, it is not useful by the time you get into the editing room to continue going back to the script. The script is now done. It's 2 films ago by the time you get into the editing room. So you've got to just look at what you shot and what you have available. And there's obviously interesting creative options that can come out in terms of what you can do with sound and with dialogue replacement and with music. You can, and certainly with visual effects, that you can really shift the tone of shots and sequences quite a bit by the time you get into the editing room. But often for independents, you can't go back and reshoot what you got. And you can't go back and shoot what you missed. So you've got to find a way of making it with the stuff that you come out of principal photography with. And that's why, for me, it feels like an absolute necessity that it's like you've got to have other plans. Because if you just go in with, like, what is the film I want to make? What is my A plan? Guess what? You're never going to get that. Nobody ever does. Even on big features, big television projects, you never get plan A to go ahead. It never works like that. You are at the mercy of your crew, you are at the mercy of time, you are at the mercy of weather, you are at the mercy of a whole lot of things you can never control, even if you have seemingly all the money in the world. So you've got to make alternate plans so you can have a clear and, I think, a concise set of choices to take into the editing room. Because if you don't, then it means you get what you get, and you've got to then figure out what plan B is going to be on the basis of what you got, because you didn't actually get most of plan A, Yeah,
true. And I haven't been really like in the film world, but I've been shooting like in like the music video side of things too. And like you mentioned, like a lot of like indie artists too. And that feeling where you only have this one day or this one take or whatever, there's something just so exciting about that to me, where it's just like it's like the do or die moment type of thing. And did you feel like that way with building Receiver as well? Did you have like a short time to like put this together and just try to bang it out?
Yeah, we had 3 days to shoot Receiver, and a lot of material to get through, particularly because I was very adamant from the beginning in terms of how we were designing the look of the film that we would not just be shooting, at eye level in close up of Suriani. That we had to break things up. You probably noticed there's a lot of high and low angle shots in the film. That was very intentional on my part in terms of like how to design the look of the film. And the thing is, those shots are complicated to set up.
Oh, I can imagine.
So we had a lot of material to get through. And the thing is, there was also quite a lot of very fraught emotional material that Tahireh Vejdani, my lead actress, had to get through. Like, there's a huge range of emotional tonality that the arc of Suriani covers over the course of the film. And the thing is, unless you're going to do a complete disservice to the performer and the performance, you have to allow the time to get the actor there. Now, part of what helps is that we had 3 days of rehearsal in advance. I'm very big on the idea of doing rehearsal and doing story development with actors before I start shooting. But at the end of the day, you still need to allow enough time for the actor to get from point A to point B to point Z, And the more emotional and the wider the range of the emotional content that the actor has to get through, the more time you kind of have to budget for it. Unless, of course, you're just... you got a day and you get what you get, and then, you're probably going to do a disservice to the performance that way. So it was a complicated film, both artistically and technically. And yeah, we only had 3 days to do it. Yeah. So I came in, like I said, with a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. And building my shot list, I built it with my editor and my script supervisor. The great thing is my editor on this film was Luke Higginson, who is also my co-writer on it. So he had a very good sense of what we needed to take away from the script and what were the things we absolutely had to keep and what were the things that would be nice to have and what are the things that we could ditch if it comes down to it. So we had a plan going in from the very beginning, and it's like I was constantly revising the shot list as the days went on. Luke was rarely on set as the editor. He was there a couple of times briefly, but I was constantly working with my script supervisor, Shauna Edward, just going through saying, okay, we're doing this shot. Maybe we can adjust the tail end of it to catch this piece of action that I want to get, and then that'll allow me to cut these two shots. And just running that by her, and she'd make suggestions, and it was great interplay. And frankly, it's the thing that allowed the film to come together as it did, is that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, and I want to say you guys killed it too. It's I got the early watch of the final product, and it's cool to hear like how little time you had to put this together, and from you guys setting up like a lot of complicated shots, as you mentioned. It's very like visually interesting, kind of trippy here and there. And the main actress, she absolutely killed it. Like I got lost in her character, and her emotions were believable too, which I'm not an actor. I can imagine like how hard and taxing that is to like present like fear and like tears and everything. And yeah, I can't even imagine. So kudos to all of you for like killing this movie. It's fucking awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, Tahireh was an absolute joy for me to work with as a director. She's, an exceptionally sensitive and creative and really precise performer. She did a huge amount of research and preparation to get ready for the role, and she put in so much work and created an environment where I was constantly challenged to up my game as the director, which I know sounds to a layperson like that might be a problem, but no, that's great. You want to be going in there having somebody who is constantly challenging you as a collaborator, and and the thing is, I think it needs to be said that she is the only actor that's on screen. All of the other characters are all off screen. They are all heard through the telephone. So she is basically carrying the entire film on her shoulders and on her face and on her body. And it was a big job, and I think I think it was made by the fact that she is just naturally so prepared and so precise. So for me, like, I find being on set really stressful. When I'm the guy who has to ultimately make the decisions that I have to live with when I get into the editing room, it's a lot of stress. I tend to not eat very much. I don't get a lot of sleep. I am constantly thinking and revising things because there's 17, 20, 30 balls that you've got to keep in the air as a director, even on a relatively small project. But Receiver for me was an absolute joy to come to work. Not because any of my stress was taken away, but just because I got the chance to watch Tahare work through the monitor, and that was just a thrill for me as somebody who loves film, getting to see somebody who was just so in tune with performance and with emotion and with characterization, and just was giving all of it to the camera, like 100% of the time. She was great.
Yeah, that's gotta be awesome too when you cast somebody and then it's the day of and you're like, oh my god, she's killing it right now. This is exactly what I want for this scene and everything. So yeah, once again, that's cool. And this film, it is going to be in a little festival. Am I correct? The Real Asian.
Yeah, actually, not such a little festival.
Yeah. I don't know why I put the word "little" in there, but it's more. Can you kind of give me more like details on this too? I'm familiar with it, but for somebody who's not familiar with it, I also know this year they're doing things differently because of the state of the world and everything. But
absolutely. So the festival where Receiver will be premiering, the premiere is at the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. It's a very well-established festival. It's going on 25 years now that it's been around. It is the largest Pan-Asian film festival in the country, and I believe the second largest in North America. And it's the third largest film festival in the city. So it's pretty well established. They are going, yes, as you suggested, because of COVID and the pandemic this year. Real Asian is going entirely virtual. All of the screenings will be available to individuals from all across Canada, which is great. The festival opens on November 12th at 10 a.m., and that's when all of the programs start screening, including Receiver. So Receiver premieres in the Film Frenzy program, starts screening on November 12th at 10 a.m. and goes clear through until the very end of November 19th at the end of the festival. And the other cool thing, though, is that on November 15th at 10 a.m., Tahare and myself are going to be taking part in a live Q&A done over Zoom, I believe, where we're going to get a chance to talk to ticket holders about the process of making the film.
Oh, that's so awesome. And yeah, leading towards it, I think probably maybe next week, just a little bit before the festival starts, we'll get this episode out, and I'll continue to remind people to check it out because it's a great thriller. It's something, again, I love promoting things that's something that's very original and that I haven't seen before. And yeah, you guys just killed it and everything.
Thanks. No, it's great to hear that trying something different works, because it's always, I don't want to say a struggle, that's probably overselling it, but until the first members of an audience that are not related to the filmmaker and not related to the film see it, it is genuinely hard to know if it is working and getting across to the audience what you had intended for it to get across. So it's really rewarding to have a range of different types of audiences be able to see it, and thus far the response has been good. But I guess we'll know more on November 12th when people at large get to start seeing the film at Real Asian.
Yeah, definitely, and hopefully it can get in some more fests this year. I know it's been so weird, and usually around this time too, I get hit up by a bunch of the horror circuit. There's a Horrorama thing. There's Blood in the Snow, which I think they might be doing digitally too. But it's I could see this film playing at all those and fit perfectly, and yeah, so maybe down the road or next year or something, you can keep putting this out and getting more people to see it.
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of film festivals that have already invited us. I'm still under embargo, so I can't talk about them yet.
Yeah,
but,
right.
We do have a few coming down the pipe in the new year, and there's still more we're waiting to hear back from. So I think with luck, come December and beyond, we're gonna be around a little bit more. But I suppose in the interim, if anybody's looking for more information, You can find my website at www.interlockpictures.com. There's information about my previous films. There's more information about Receiver on there. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Interlock Pictures. And if you want to listen to my personal noodlings, you can find me on Twitter at CCamOperator.
Yes, awesome. I'm actually going to follow all of these right when I turn this interview off. I'm a new fan, and I just want to thank you for your time, Cav, and thanks for showing me a brand new awesome movie, and all the best going into this festival.
Thank you, Sean. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for inviting me on to chat with you.
Yeah, awesome. We'll have to do a part 2 for your next film, too.
I hope so.
To the Creative Imbalance podcast can burn in hell.